Some cars get all the glory, featured in movies, plastered on posters, and praised by everyone. But others? They get overlooked, ignored, and completely underrated. Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked muscle cars of the 2000s, a beast with serious power, an LS2 under the hood, and a legacy that deserved way more respect. Stick around, because this one might just change the way you see modern muscle. The Pontiac GTO LS2, the most underrated muscle car of the 2000s. The Pontiac GTO LS2 is the most underrated muscle car of the 2000s. Let's start with a quick history lesson. The 1964 Pontiac GTO, that's the car that's considered the very first muscle car, right? An absolute icon. When that beast first hit the streets, it kicked off a whole new era of high-powered, high-performance American cars that captured the hearts and minds of gearheads everywhere. So when I tell you that the Pontiac GTO is the most underrated muscle car of the 2000s, I know that might raise a few eyebrows. But hear me out, my fellow car enthusiasts. Pontiac decided to bring the GTO back in the 2000s, and they gave it a little twist. They actually took some inspiration from Down Under and modeled it after the Holden Monaro, a muscle car made by GM's Australian division. So this fifth-gen GTO had a little Aussie flair to it, a unique spin on a legendary American icon. How many of you out there had no idea the 2000 GTO had an Aussie connection? I know I was surprised when I first learned that tidbit. Now, the 2004 model came with a nice 350 horsepower Corvette engine, which is solid power and definitely nothing to sneeze at. But it's the 2005 LS2 version that I think really deserves the underrated title. See, they bumped the power up to 400 horses with that new engine. So you're talking about one of the fastest American production cars of the 2000s, a true muscle car monster that could leave a lot of the competition in the dust. And yet, despite that incredible performance, these things are still super affordable and overlooked by a lot of people. Per Kelley Blue Book, the original base price of the 2005 GTO LS2 was just over $30,000. And today, the average sale price is around $22,500, with the lowest recorded sale being $9,500 and the highest being $37,000. That's an absolute steal for the kind of power and performance you're getting. In contrast, let's look at another iconic muscle car from that era, the 2005 Ford Mustang GT. The original base price on that was $31,420, with an average sale price today of $20,366. So the Pontiac GTO LS2 isn't just faster, it's also managed to hold its value better. Does that surprise any of you? I know a lot of people probably assume the Mustang would be the better investment, but the numbers tell a different story. The point is, the 2005 Pontiac GTO LS2 is an absolute beast of a muscle car that deserves way more love and attention than it gets. With 400 horsepower on tap, blistering acceleration, classic styling, and a bargain basement price tag, it's the ultimate underdog that's begging to be rediscovered by enthusiasts. Trust me, once you drive one of these things, you're going to wonder why they aren't more celebrated. The LS2-powered Pontiac GTO was one of the fastest muscle cars on the road. All right, let's talk about what really makes the Pontiac GTO LS2 such an absolute beast, its insane performance capabilities. Because while this car may have flown under the radar for a lot of people, the raw power and speed it packs are anything but subtle. The 2004 GTO came with GM's trusty old LS1 engine, you know, the same one that was in Corvettes, Camaros, and Firebirds back in the day. And that was no slouch, putting down 350 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque, enough to hit 155 to 160 miles per hour and rocket from 0 to 60 in just 5.3 seconds. But then in 2005, Pontiac decided to really take things to the next level. They swapped in the LS2 V8, the same engine that was powering the Corvette C6 at the time. And let me tell you, that made a huge difference. Now you're talking about a 6.0-liter V8, putting out a monstrous 400 horsepower and 400 lb-ft of torque. Can you imagine what it must feel like to bury the throttle in one of these things? The instant, earth-shattering thrust as all that power kicks in? It must be absolutely exhilarating. And the performance numbers back that up. 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 5 seconds. A top speed of 170 to 178 miles per hour, depending on whether it has a governor. And an incredibly quick quarter-mile time of just 13.3 seconds. Those are the kind of figures you'd normally associate with a Corvette or a Mustang GT, not a relatively obscure muscle car like the GTO. I'd love to line one of these LS2 GTOs up next to a brand new Camaro or Mustang and see who comes out on top. That would be one heck of a race. I know there's always going to be debate among gearheads about which muscle car is truly the best. But when it comes to raw, unadulterated performance, I don't think you can deny that the Pontiac GTO LS2 is right up there with the elite. It's got the power, the speed, the acceleration, everything you want in a high-octane, thrill-a-minute muscle car. And the crazy part is, these things are still so overlooked and underappreciated. You're talking about one of the fastest American production cars of the 2000s, with performance that can hang with the best of them. And yet, you can still find them selling for well under $30,000 in a lot of cases. That's an absolute steal. The LS2 GTO models were produced in limited numbers. You know, another key reason I think the Pontiac GTO LS2 deserves the title of most underrated muscle car of the 2000s is its sheer rarity. These things just weren't built in huge numbers like a lot of the other muscle cars from that era. Let's take a look at the production numbers. In 2005, Pontiac only made around 11,000 units of the LS2 GTO. The following year, in 2006, they bumped it up to just under 14,000. Now, that might sound like a decent amount, but when you compare it to the millions of Mustangs, Camaros, and Challengers that were built during that time, it's downright minuscule. In fact, the LS2 GTO is way more exclusive than even some of the most coveted muscle cars from the 2000s. Take the Ford Mustang GT, for example. In 2005, Ford produced over 160,000 of those. That's more than 10 times the number of LS2 GTOs Pontiac built that same year. So when you see one of these Pontiac GTOs out on the road, you know you're looking at something pretty special, right? It's not just another mass-produced muscle car. It's a relatively rare, exclusive performance machine that really stands out from the crowd. And I think that exclusivity is a big part of what makes the LS2 GTO so appealing, especially to the hardcore driving enthusiasts out there. There's just something extra rewarding about owning a car that not everyone and their brother has, you know? Plus, the LS2 GTO offers this extra layer of driver engagement that you don't necessarily get with a lot of the more common muscle cars. See, the majority of them were built with a manual transmission, so you get to really feel that power and control the car with your own two hands. No slushy automatic to dull the sensations. How many of you out there have experience driving a manual transmission muscle car? What was that like compared to the typical automatic experience? And on top of that, the manual-equipped LS2 GTO was actually a little quicker off the line too, with that extra engagement translating to slightly better acceleration. So you're talking about a rare, exclusive muscle car that also delivers a more visceral, driver-focused experience. And you know, with its Pontiac pedigree and limited production numbers, the LS2 GTO also has serious potential to become a collector's item down the road. As more people rediscover this underrated gem, demand is only going to grow, which means values are likely to rise as well. The LS2-powered Pontiac GTOs offer understated looks with a comfortable interior. All right, let's talk about one of the big reasons the Pontiac GTO LS2 flew under the radar during the 2000s, its somewhat underwhelming design. Here's the deal. When Pontiac brought the GTO nameplate back in the 2000s, they basically just took the Holden Monaro, a muscle car made by GM's Australian division, and slapped the iconic GTO badge on it. So this 5th-gen version didn't really share much in common, styling-wise, with the classic GTOs from the 60s and 70s that a lot of muscle car fans know and love. And I get it. If you're a die-hard GTO enthusiast, That's probably a bit of a letdown. You were probably hoping for something a little more reminiscent of those sharp, angular lines and that in-your-face muscle car attitude. Instead, you got a car that was a little more subtle and understated in its design. Now, don't get me wrong. The GTO LS2 isn't an ugly car by any means. It's got clean, simple styling and a really nice, well-appointed interior. But if you're the kind of gearhead who loves that old-school, flamboyant muscle car look, this 5th-gen version probably just didn't quite do it for you. However, I will say that more low-key, sleeper-style design is actually part of what makes the GTO LS2 so intriguing to a lot of performance enthusiasts. It's not trying to be the loudest, flashiest muscle car on the road. Instead, it's all about that silent but deadly attitude. A wolf in sheep's clothing, you know? Because at the end of the day, what really matters is what's under the hood. And the GTO LS2 has got it where it counts, with that 400 horsepower LS2 V8 that can embarrass a lot of the louder, showier muscle cars out there. So while the design may have been a letdown for some die-hard GTO purists, I think for a lot of gearheads who value raw performance over flashy good looks, the LS2 is still an absolute gem. It may not be the sharpest-looking muscle car, but it's definitely one of the most intriguing and underrated options out there. Thank you for sticking till the end. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button.